CRH is an international diversified building materials company with operations in 35 countries worldwide. CRH are the largest company quoted in the Irish Stock Exchange. In 2009, the company had sales of over 17 billion euro and returned profits of 598 billion euro. This would give you an idea of the size of this company. In 2001, CRH purchased 25% of the Israeli company Mashav Initiative and Development Limited. Mashav itself, which is a holding group, own Nesher Israel Cement Enterprises. Nesher are Israel's sole cement producer. They have a monopoly of cement. They sell 75 to 90% of all cement sold in Israel and in the occupied territories of Palestine. The use of Nesher cement has been well documented. This is the Nesher logo here. Well documented across many construction sites in the West Bank settlements, their infrastructure, and in the construction of the Jerusalem Light Rail that Adri referred to earlier. In 2004, CRH admitted to Amnesty International that in all probability their cement is being used in the construction of the wall. Furthermore, the Mashav Group, through its subsidiary Nesher, has several other subsidiaries extensively involved in construction activities. Nesher own 50% of Tavura, who wholly own Tashtet Construction Machinery. Tashtet itself are the sole importers of Liebherr excavators and cranes. These excavators have been documented destroying Palestinian farms and olive groves to enable the construction of the illegal separation wall. In this photograph here, we have a Liebherr machine which is demolishing farms in the Naline area. These activities facilitate the continued ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from their land and the expansion of Israel's colonial project in occupied Palestine. The construction of the settlement and their infrastructure is contrary to several articles of the Fourth Geneva Convention. These constitute breaches of international humanitarian law. The International Court of Justice reaffirmed this in the 2004 advisory opinion on the wall and the settlements. The impact of the separation wall, which was very well illustrated by some of our speakers earlier, the settlements and their infrastructure on the Palestinian people are contrary to the basic rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. These constitute breaches of many provisions of international human rights law. Some of these breaches of international law constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity. CRH, through their part ownership of Mashav, are complicit with these violations of international law. In 2006, the Divestment Task Force of the New England Conference of the United Methodist Church wrote to CRH, expressing their concern that the company's activities support in a significant way the occupation, Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories. CRH's response was they had no control over the end use of their products and they could not discriminate who they sold their products to. This clearly did not satisfy the task force ethical criteria and they put CRH on their divestment list. In March 2009, the Ireland-Palestine Solidarity Campaign wrote to the Chief Executive and to the Board of Directors, requesting that they support and respect the protection of internationally proclaimed human rights within the company's sphere of influence. Let's remember, CRH have 2 out of 8 of the directors on the board of Mashav. This letter illustrated the nature of the human rights abuses which are occurring in the occupied Palestinian territories and the nature of CRH's complicity in those abuses. It put the company on notice of that complicity and invited them to divest from Mashav. In response, CRH claimed that they were aware of the responsibilities to respect human rights, but washed their hands of any responsibility for their subsidiaries' activities. It is our submission that CRH are fully aware of their complicity, and yet they continue to ignore and evade the responsibility for it. They continue to ignore the requests of human rights and church organisations to divest from Mashaf. And at this stage, it seems that the only way of encouraging CRH to divest from Mashaf is by raising public awareness of CRH's illegal activities and encourage state, church, financial, trade unions and other investors to divest from CRH. As a result, the IPSC have instigated a global CRH divestment campaign, and we welcome the decision by the United Methodist Church to divest from CRH, and ASN Bank in Holland, who have also divested from CRH. And we hope that we will be able to spread this message right across as many countries as possible. I call on the Tribunal to urge the Irish Government to take action against CRH to bring an end to their complicity. I call on the Tribunal to take action against CRH's unethical business conduct and irresponsible investment. I call on the Tribunal to take action against CRH's complicity where they have failed to take action themselves. I call on this Tribunal to make findings of guilt in relation to CRH's complicity with Israel's violations of human rights and international law in the occupied Palestinian territories. And finally, I call upon the Tribunal to support the call for CRH to divest from Mashaf. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to highlight the shameful complicity of this Irish company in Israel's violations of international law.
One of the most, you've mentioned it in passing, that is the ICJ or World Court decision on the wall in 2004. Now, that was a dramatic watershed decision which not only held that there were severe breaches of human rights law and international humanitarian law, an overwhelming judgment 13-1. There is a particular paragraph, I'm going to cite it so the company, if they're listening, can go back and have a look at it themselves. It's paragraph 159 of their judgment, and it brings in the Irish government as well as the company itself and the guidelines you've mentioned. And I'm going to read it because it's so important, and I'm sure you're aware of it. So everybody here knows exactly what the World Court has said about this situation in unequivocal terms. Given the character and the importance of the rights and obligations involved, the Court is of the view that all states, and can I interpose, it means all states, whether they're parties or not, are under an obligation not to recognize the illegal situation resulting from the construction of the wall in the occupied Palestinian territory, including in and around East Jerusalem. They are also under an obligation not to render and or assist in maintaining the situation created by such construction, as we saw in the film before lunch. It is also for all states, while respecting the United Nations Charter, the international law, to see to it that any impediment resulting from the construction of the wall to the exercise by the Palestinian people of the right to self-determination is brought to an end. It goes on. Now, those are fairly clear terms, are they not?
They are, yep.
Right. Now, the first thing at one level is, has there been any approach to the ICC or any other international organisation or tribunal, to be more precise, to in fact see if this can be carried through in the case of the Irish government?
Not that I'm aware of.
Right. So we could be in a position
Absolutely.
to petition the ICC to have a look at this, since in fact it's the ICJ who are passing judgment on this. The second thing is, of course, is that the Irish government under this have a very clear obligation, and they plainly haven't fulfilled it. So the second level is we could petition the Irish government to get on with it straight away. No question about that. That's their obligation.
Yes.
And of course, if they're listening to this internet broadcast, or any part of them are listening to it, or get to hear of it, they could take action in the way the Dutch government did in an entirely separate case. In other words, tomorrow morning they could raid the offices of this company and confiscate their computers. Is that right?
Yeah, and I'd certainly encourage it.